Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. We are from Group 3. We'll be presenting the topic of Islamic Epistemology and Western Epistemology and the impacts to the civilization. The presenters of this group would be me, Farisah Irdina binti RAZAK, AMIRAH binti KASIM, NAJWA binti FARID, and HUSNA binti GHANI. The discussion of the topic would be what is epistemology, the development of Islamic and Western epistemology, and the impacts of Islamic and Western epistemology on knowledge and civilization, as well as resolution. First and foremost, what is knowledge? As we all studied and we know, there are a lot of definitions of knowledge, but generally, I would like to highlight here that knowledge is the range of one's information or understanding or familiarity with science, art, or technique. However, it will be very good if we go into deeper the meaning of knowledge from Islamic perspective and Western perspective so that we can compare both of them. Now, we're going to know the meaning of knowledge based on the Islamic perspective. As we all know, Allah is the ultimate truth in Islam. He is the creator and His creation represents the manifestation of His holiness. The creation is also a collection of signs that advance and facilitates the reading of the world, leading to an understanding and appreciation of the Creator. So, by quoting that, it follows that knowledge is closely related to truth. It is about knowing the true and actual states of things at any level of existential reality, no matter how magnificent or insignificant they are. The truth is what matters, not the quantifiable dimensions of things. Indeed, truth and knowledge are two sides of the same coin. Furthermore, just as there is only one existential reality and one certainty, there is only one knowledge, or what is sometimes referred to as the unity of knowledge that relates to my second point here. All knowledge, including sciences and religious knowledge, are coming from Allah. He is the source of knowledge. The most that could be said is that knowledge can only be divided and classified in accordance with its similarity, along with strength, as far as the spiritual objectives of Sharia are concerned. Due to that, knowledge is sacred, meaning that all knowledge belongs to Allah. Next, Prophet ﷺ meant for Muslims to seek knowledge in order to find opportunities and ways to live their lives in accordance with the desires and plans of the Creator and Sustainer of life, rather than their own or those of others when he said to seek knowledge. This relates to the next idea that I want to emphasize, which is the connection between knowledge and life. Life is not what people want it to be, it is what it is. This is due to the fact that only Islam and its cause, which embraces both the interests of heaven and the earth, can provide a true or authentic life. Similar to this, there is no true contentment or happiness absent from Islamic guidance, which is the only way to successfully negotiate life's difficulties and guarantee both God's pleasure and man's bliss in paradise. So, Islam is life, and knowledge is what keeps it alive. A good Muslim must be knowledgeable, and a knowledgeable Muslim must be pious and good, even though they are not completely equal. If a Muslim is not sufficiently pious and upright, there is a serious problem with his knowledge. Moving on, based on my research, Muslim philosophers are mostly interested in the pursuit of happiness for all people. Regardless of what they define as this happiness, they all fully agree that knowledge is the only path to it. Muslim philosophers concentrated their epistemological work on the investigation of the nature, sources of knowledge, and limit of knowledge. So, to relate to the first point, Muslim philosophers consider knowledge to be the grasping of the immaterial forms, natures, essences, or realities of things. They are agreed that the forms of things are either material that is existing in the matter, or immaterial which is existing in themselves. Next, divine revelation has always been regarded as the best source of knowledge, but it has never been the only one. The Quranic laws and concepts have long been of interest to Muslim thinkers, but they have never been fully understood because they were only developed using common sense rather than the unified approach. Muslims view knowledge sources differently from materialistic atheists who see existence as the only source of knowledge and who are unable to imagine any other method of knowledge than that by which the truth of the physical universe came to be known. Furthermore, it is distinct from other religious metaphysical ideas. The fundamental difference between the Islamic concept and these other systems is that Islam provides evidence from the observable universe for its assertion that there is a second source of knowledge, namely revelation, whereas the materialists deny this reality, which is indicated by the source of knowledge they acknowledge, which puts them in contradiction, which is the proponents of other religious metaphysical conceptions believe in sources for which they provide evidence. Moreover, Islam also acknowledged reason and logic as well as senses to be the sources of knowledge. Furthermore, Surah Al-Isra verse 85 expressed a crucial principle in the theory of knowledge, which is man was created with limitations that prevent him from comprehending everything. Accepting this limitation is the highest form of wisdom as it opens the door to all possible knowledge. Next, Islam has degrees of knowledge. To recap, the first one is knowledge by inference with the certainty of mind. This knowledge is based on what people say to you. For example, someone tells you about Mecca and you only can imagine that. Higher than that, knowledge by observation with the certainty of sight is where you go there and see by yourself with your own eyes. For example, you experience what Mecca looks like. Then, the highest point is when knowledge with inner experiential certainty. This is the highest level of certainty that is based on conviction. For example, belief in the oneness of Allah or known as Tawheed. However, from a Western perspective, there are two sources of knowledge which are empirical evidence and reason. Empirical evidence is related to what you can observe, which is through your senses and verifiable facts. The reason is a logical argument and rational analysis. However, according to one study, there is an argument and debate about the sources of knowledge among empiricists and rationalists. According to rationalists, every decision can only be made through reason. They contend that our senses can deceive us. The moon, for example, appears small to senses, however, it is large. As a result, they claim that we should only trust reason, not senses. On the contrary, empiricists contend that people can say whatever they want while claiming that the statement is reasonable. The issue is that scientific validity can be called into question because there are no criteria for judging rational processes. The logic is not scientific. True scientific knowledge is empirical evidence based on sense and the discovery of facts to provide evidence. As in Islam, we have degrees of knowledge. However, in Western, they have this type of knowledge. According to Donald Davidson, there are three types of knowledge, namely knowledge of our own minds, knowledge of other minds, and knowledge of an external reality. The popular division of the varieties of knowledge is found in three categories, which are personal, procedural, and propositional. The first kind of knowledge is personal knowledge, or knowledge by acquaintance. This is the kind of knowledge that we are claiming to have when we say things like, I know Mozart's music. It is simply like a theory. You simply claim that you know something. The second kind of knowledge is procedural knowledge, or knowledge of how to do something. It is also known as ability knowledge. For example, one may claim to know how to drive a car. To know how to drive a car is to have a certain ability to drive a car. In doing that, one is not simply claiming that one understands the theory involved in those activities. Rather, it is claimed that actually one possesses the skills involved or one is able to do the activity. Likewise, it seems that if you have the ability to do something, it follows that you know how to do it. And then, the third one is claiming to have propositional knowledge. With propositional knowledge, one claims to have knowledge of different things. It is also known as descriptive or declarative knowledge. You declare that you have knowledge about different things. I think that's all from me. I will pass to the next presenter.
Assalamualaikum, my name is AMIRAH and I'm going to continue to talk about the development of epistemology from Socrates' era to the modern era. Several prominent philosophers and its idea on theory of knowledge will be discussed on this part. Why philosophers discuss about epistemology and why it's so important to the extent it become one of the branches of philosophy. Epistemology concerns about questions like how I know something, how I understand what is real, what are the basis of true knowledge, and what may justify belief justify. So there must be a way, method, or means to answer to that question. So what are the means? Is it through senses, or is it through divine book, or there is pre-existing knowledge, or maybe through common sense? which one outweigh which. So these are among the issues discussed in the pursuit of true knowledge. The discourse about epistemology can be traced as early as Plato era. During his lifetime, people believe that what they perceive is considered as knowledge, and Plato did not agree with that. This is because if that being so, then the nature of knowledge will become really subjective. According to Plato, knowledge must be certain, infallible, and error-free. It cannot be relative. Hence, that's the reason why Plato rejected such kind of thinking. Apart from that, Plato is famous with his theory of forms or idea. In this theory, he argued that all things in this world has an innate idea. Everything in this world is just a copy of that perfect idea that exists beyond this physical world. So, to make it clear, let's take example of idea of justice. The idea of justice in nature is very perfect, it's very ideal, and humans are unable to implement the ideal form of justice. So, if we are unable to implement or manifest it perfectly, so how we know that there is a ideal of the ideal form of justice in the first place? The answer is through reason. And Plato said only highly intellectual people can contemplate about this idea. So based on this, we can say that Plato is rationalist and idealist in the same time. Next, we have another great philosopher who come after Plato, which is Aristotle. He is very much different compared to his teacher. As I mentioned before, Plato is rationalist. He said that knowledge is based on rational apprehension of perfect form that exists in the outer world. But Aristotle disagreed with him. He argued that human also can seek true knowledge through human senses, and it is no less credible than reason. We can still recognize, understand, comprehend something through sensory experience. To make it clear, when we engage with something habitually, constantly, we must have been made observation, and later we got the experience from that. And that experience can be regarded as knowledge because we now have apprehended their sensible forms. Unlike Plato, who thinks that what you experience in this world is not their true innate idea. But Aristotle said what you experience is the reality. There is no such transcendent idea behind every visible forms in this world because it sounds very idealistic to him. So to conclude, Aristotle is an empiricist as he appreciates human senses as a means to acquire knowledge. Now I have talked about Plato and Aristotle. They are the Greek philosophers who lived about 2000 years ago. Now we move a little bit forward to the medieval era. This era is where Islamic civilization was flourished. So I'm going to talk about one of the prominent Muslim philosophers, which is Al-Ghazali. First of all, Al-Ghazali argued that there are two kinds of truth. One is perceptual belief and the other one is rational belief. The former derived from sense data, meanwhile the latter derived from or acquired from faculty of reason. Despite recognizing these two sources of knowledge, he still doubts the truth that being sought from these two sources. This is because it's not perfect and lacking because sometimes they can give wrong information. So he becomes quote-unquote frustrated and later suffer from spiritual crisis for quite some time. He went into isolation until one day God struck him with light into his chest. Now he gained back his strength and free from doubt. So from this journey, he concluded that intellect and senses is not sufficient to bring human to the ultimate truth. We need guidance, inspiration or intuition from God. So in the context, it called as kashaf. And how to obtain kashaf? The answer is through direct experience with God. However, this kind of knowledge is very special. Not all people can arrive at this highest state of knowledge. It's only bestowed upon committed worshippers like prophets and saints. So all in all, according to Imam Al-Ghazali, sources of knowledge are senses, reason, divine revelation, and kashaf. Now we're moving on to the early modern era, or also known as Enlightenment. During this period, epistemological discourse flourished again in Europe. And one of the famous philosophers that I want to discuss on this part is René Descartes. He is a proponent of rationalism. He also coined the famous phrase cogito ergo sum, or can be translated as I think, therefore I am. How he arrived with that conclusion? It was actually started when he doubted the truth behind all his beliefs and his past experiences. He doubted what he had learned. He doubted about the God that he worshipped, and to the extent he doubted his own existence. Like, do I really exist? Descartes imagined that there is an entity known as evil genius who created this illusionary world and deceived him all this time. So what he did to overcome this matter? Firstly, he disbelieved all his beliefs and inspect it one by one. So long story short, he becomes certain again, especially about his existence. So the argument is like this. He initially thought that there is an evil spirit who always told lie about the reality. But the fact that he is thinking is actually indicate that he exists. In other words, if you do not exist in the first place, how you can think like that? And one more thing is, the act of thinking itself proves that we have consciousness in our mind. We become aware with ourselves. So that's basically how Descartes justify his existence based on reasoning, of course. Next, another philosopher that I want to highlight is David Hume, which is very well known as an empiricist. And he didn't agree with Descartes that knowledge can be certain only through reason, because Hume claimed that not all knowledge is priori. According to Hume, there are two sources of knowledge, which are relations of ideas and matters of fact. Relations of ideas can be known intuitively, meaning that by only using reason, we can know that it is true. You don't need empirical evidence to justify its truthfulness. For example, like geometry, pure mathematics, algebra, and so on. On the other hand, empirical evidence is necessary and important to prove matter of fact. How we prove matter of fact? Through relations of cause and effect. But they cause the relation from rationalist understanding and human understanding as an empiricist is very different. For rationalists, they claim that there is a necessary connection between cause and effect. To make it clear, let's imagine a scenario where a man is about to kick a ball. What will happen to that ball? The ball moves, right? The ball is moving because that person has kicked onto it. We can predict the consequence because we use reason. However, Hume argued that there is no necessary connection between cause and effect. That particular belief is justified because of habit and custom. Meaning that since we are very used with that occurrence, now it is embedded in our mind. We think it is true because we always see that event. Thus, applying the argument to the scenario, you cannot be assured that the ball is going to move when that person is about to kick a ball. You must see it firsthand that the ball has been kicked and consequently moved. So, to conclude, experience is important to prove the relation of cause and effect. Relying on reason alone is not sufficient. So, that's basically an argument tendered by Hume.
My name is NAJWA FARID, and in this section, I will be presenting on how Islamic epistemology impacts civilization. Islamic civilization that stretched from 661 to 1923 or 7th century to 16th century has its own history that started in the Arabian Peninsula, or to be specific, in Mecca. Umar Kapra, the author of Muslim Civilization, The Causes of Decline and the Need for Reform, in his book mentioned that no person will ever believe that a great civilization will emerge from the Arab, as he described the society at that time were bitter internecine feuds, paucity of resources, a harsh climate, difficult terrain, excruciating poverty, combined with flagrant inequality of wealth and income, that made it almost impossible for the society to reform. Compared to the great empire around Mecca at that time, including the Byzantine and Persian Empire that were academically, economically, and militarily empowered. However, the chronicles event in history has proved otherwise, and Islam has once become an Ustaziyatul Alam, or teachers of the world, because it has established a great civilization and be an exemplar in various areas to the rest of the world. When scholars discuss the most fundamental factor that enables the Arabs to reform, it is closely related with Islam. Islam has come not only to change one's faith, but comes along with the focus to grow and develop in insan, or a person. This is simply because what makes a great civilization depends on the people that live in that society. Therefore, after numbers of articles, journals, and books, we have discovered the four main contributions of Islamic epistemology to the world. Let us review one by one. The first one is Islamic epistemology stimulates a holistic development in scientific, religious, moral, philosophical, and cultural development. For example, in terms of scientific in mathematics or science, Al-Khwarizmi has adopted the Indian numeral system to replace the ubiquitous Roman numerals. As a result, calculation in mathematics become less complicated and time-effective. He also had added the number of zero as one of the numbers and developed algebra. In addition, Omar Khayyam has formulated the binomial theorem, a method that has been used in developing smart handphone that we have today, and trigonometry that enable a Muslim to calculate the exact position on Earth, who must pray in the direction of Mecca. Eventually, this has served as a basic scientific method on how the GPS system works today. Moreover, Ibn Sina has written about the connection of mental and physical health and concluded that negative thoughts can cause illness just as much as other factors such as toxins, injury or diet, which is a fundamental fact that closely related in nowadays problems. On the other hand, Islamic civilization does not neglect Islamic developments. For example, Imam Bukhari has developed scientific approach in determining the authenticity of an individual hadith. Furthermore, the extensive development in Islamic jurisprudence that includes criminal law, muamalat, munakahat and ibadat, and the establishment of usul fiqh that has derived 7 methods to extract new law in Islam that are not exist in the time of Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Next, Islamic civilization through Islamic scholars has served as a bridge between ancient Greek and West development that we have witnessed in the present. This is opposed to the most people who believe Islamic civilization does not contribute to the advancement of knowledge that the West have today. Instead, they have a belief that Islamic scholars are simply imitating the works of the ancient Greeks like Plato, Socrates, Ptolemy and many more. However, this is a misleading truth because Islamic scholars do not simply copy the works of ancient Greek but have refined it to the advanced level. In fact, they also have improved or corrected the works of Greek philosophers that have mistakes. For example, Al-Biruni, who studied the work of Ptolemy, stated that the earth is motionless and everything revolves around it. However, Al-Biruni has opposed that statement and proposed the fact that is stated by Galen is without scientific proof, and he insisted that the earth in fact is spin on its axis. Secondly, Al-Razi, one of the Islamic scholars in medicine, has challenged the idea of Galen, a physician that supported a theory that diseases were caused by imbalance of fluids in the body. Therefore, Al-Razi wrote in his book on doubts about Galen and countered with a statement that physical ailments could not simply be attributed to an imbalance among the fluids, but to certain external and internal factors that must be resolved in order to treat the illness. Islamic scholars have also refined the Greek knowledge that most of it is relying on theoretical part to the practicality of the knowledge. A lot of them have developed a scientific approach to solve problems and facilitate people in managing and acting on daily basis. For instance, Al-Razi has developed specific and effective cure for frequent illness such as cough, headache and constipation. Thirdly, the establishment of Baitul Hikmah as a homegrown intellectual giant that was founded in Baghdad during the 7th Abbasid Caliph, which is Al-Ma'mun. The establishment of Baitul Hikmah is important in Islamic history as it has become the central development of all knowledge by acting as a university, library, translation institute and research lab. If I want to make an analogy about Baitul Hikmah at the present, it is by imagining a place that constitutes the top and renowned university of the world, such as Harvard University and Oxford University in one places. That is how the society around the world sees the influence and importance of Baitul Hikmah, a place that gathered scholars in different expertise and areas. The next one is on how the development during the golden age of Muslim world is not to fulfill the worldly needs, but the main purpose in their study is to seek the pleasure of God. For example, Muhammad ibn Zakaria al-Razi has provided free services in treating poor patients in Baghdad's famous hospital because he believed that the medicine is a sacred behavior entrusted by God to do good to anyone who require it. In fact, the establishment of hospital is because in ancient times not everyone had the means to hire a private doctor. Thus, the establishment of a hospital will help most of the people to get medical services. The Islamic scholars at the time has also enhanced the usage of astrolabe, an instrument that once used for a mystic purpose in Greek times, to a useful knowledge, which is an instrument that was used as a staple of navigation, particularly by ship. Consequently, travelling to Mecca for the pilgrimage has become much easier for Muslims to travel in a long distance.
Now, I'm Husna, and we just discussed how Muslims contribute to civilization and knowledge, and now I will explain how Western epistemology impacts civilization and knowledge. As we know, there were many contributions that Western contribute, but I will just explain some of them only, which were mathematics, biology, physics, cosmology and geology, and lastly, technology. One of the Western contribution is Aristotelianism school, Aristotle school. Okay. Aristotelianism is a school or tradition of philosophy from the Socratic or classical period of ancient Greece that takes its defining inspiration from the work of the 4th century BC by philosopher Aristotle. Aristotle developed the early philosophical work of Socrates and Plato in a more practical and down-to-earth manner, and he was the first to create a comprehensive system of philosophy that were encompassing ethics, metaphysics, aesthetic, logic, epistemology, politics, and science. He also rejected the rationalism and idealism exposed by Platonism, which was his own teacher, and advocated the characteristic Aristotelian virtue of phronesis, which was practical wisdom or prudence. Another cornerstone of Aristotelianism is the idea of theology, the idea that all things are designed for or directed toward to a final result or purpose. Aristotle also assumed that for knowledge to be true, it must be unchangeable, as must the object of the knowledge. And during the Middle Ages, Aristotelian metaphysics was influenced Islamic and Jewish philosophers and remains an influence on Christian theology to this day. And this was the significance of Aristotle's contributions. Okay, firstly is mathematics discipline. Okay. One of the Western scholars or philosophers, Archimedes, introduced the method of exhaustion. Okay, what are the method of exhaustion? Is to measure the areas of shapes. Okay, for example, we can quantify the value of pi. Okay, and the second one is prime numbers. He introduced the prime numbers to bring out the concept of infinity. Okay, as you can see, the picture that I provided. Okay. All his contributions has left a great significance and value until today, because it makes students easier to learn the mathematical concept. Okay, next discipline is astronomy and science. Okay, the philosopher that was contributed is Galileo Galilei. He usually people misunderstood that he discovered the invention of telescope, but not. He only making improvement to the invention of telescopic only. Okay. Other contribution that he made is he invented the engineering compass, and he also discovered the law of a simple pendulum. Okay. All his contributions has lead to the advancement and development of the science and also astronomy. Moving forward to biology discipline, okay, I choose contribution of Aristotle that uses the concept of species to make empirical claims about the functions and behavior of individual animals. Like we have learned before from the previous lessons about empirical evidence, right? Okay, empirical evidence is when we want to claim something, we have to do an experiment or observation to claim the truth of something. Okay. In discipline of biology, Aristotle discovered that respiration is that it exists in order to bring air into the body to produce pneuma. And from the Aristotle's mechanical explanation is that air that has been heated in the lungs is pushed out by colder air outside the body. Okay, next, cosmology and geology discipline. Okay, from Aristotle, I choose Aristotle contribution. Okay, Aristotle has discovered that the Earth are spherical. Okay, how he discovered this shape of the Earth Okay, because he noticing that water naturally forms spherical droplets and that it flows toward the lowest point on a plate. Okay, from this his observation, he claimed that Earth are sphere. Okay, we can you can see from the picture that I provided. Okay, last but not least, the discipline that I will explain is on technology. Okay, from the Western contribution, they have contribute to invention of the ship. Okay, what they discover. Okay, the combination of light, maneuverable ship with the firepower of iron cannon gave European adventure as a decisive advantage. Like they have discovered the advancement of the ship that give them a victory during a war. Although there were many contributions that Western made, they are also come from Western perspective. Okay, because modern Western epistemology follows a logic that is described as the plausibility of knowing. Since epistemology studies knowing, it struggles to comprehend the criteria of distinguishing between true or adequate knowing from false or inadequate knowing. This in turn leads to assessing what methods of justification best achieve the objective of knowing something to be true. And now, as always, epistemologists continue to devise increasingly complicated formulas to understand the claims of knowledge. And not only that, they also discredit an attempt to establish the justification of belief by arguing that there are good reasons that why Islam we not only do the experiment or observation, but we also hold Quran and HUSNA as our sources of knowledge. To conclude from the previous discussion, Western has embarked on its epistemic journey after becoming disenchanted with its hitherto natural order, free itself from the chains of blind faith. Europe then largely rid itself of established meaning and thereby implemented doubts in that was how it was understood. Rather than sit back and become dismayed at the ensuing destructiveness, its philosophers confidently stood up and peered ahead with exceedingly high hope in what could be. Using science, they forged ahead and moved forward, ready to erect a new era of knowledge. The cornerstone of this particular intellectual tradition, in the University and College of Europe and North America, the most striking aspect of education was this supplanting of doubt. This doubt-infested paradigm, when poorly transplanted into Muslim society through its educational institutions, that produce chaos. This is hardly surprising, for imitation without understanding cannot engender creativity. What liberated Europe enslaved the Muslim world. Therefore, sought to differentiate between society and their respective epistemic tradition. Okay, why Islam holds a realist view rather than Western, that Muslim or Islam has dependent existence of reality whether or not we are aware, since it testifies to the existence of creative and spiritual forces superior to the existence of humans, which testify to the existence of knowledge before the teaching of it to angels and the first human. Likewise, there is room for subjectivist ontology in Islam, since it is the Creator that has given us the ability to learn with our minds and senses, like we using our five senses, and has provided us with such necessity of life as food, housing, clothing, and other provision, thus allowing us to control our own reality. Islam not limited human and encourage us to learn and to think. Okay, that's all from our group. Thank you.